So I will say one thing before I start with the map, a bit with the geography. Catastrophe, as I try to write about, the idea or the relation, it's coming from theology. The way I read it, or the resources, the background, the reference, it's through the Jewish Kabbalah. And the place of the catastrophe. Later I will explain about two messianic movements in Judaism, one leading to the catastrophe, the other one not. And then I will connect it to the reality today, or the, people say conflict, I don't know anymore if it's a conflict in the Middle East or total war. The argument with maps. So just to show the Middle East, this is how it's looked today. In the text, I describe three waves from the Ottoman to the British or the French mandate, and where the third wave, it's, I think, coming up. I don't think it's arrived, the peak, it's still there. So here we can see the Ottoman division. You don't have yet Jordan, you don't have Lebanon, all are new countries. The empire, the relation with the other empires. This is Sexpisco in just before the division, yes, the creation of the zones. This is, I will say, the Middle East map today. The extended also Middle East. Some people include Egypt in the Middle East, some exclude it as North Africa. Those are the countries that speak Arabic. Important maybe to say about Arabic, it's spoken, or the spoken language, it's different in many countries. The written one is the same, which is connect culturally everyone that can read. It's not everyone, but connect them to the same source. So everybody can read the same material, they speak differently, but the history that construct the conscious of Middle East, North Africa, and some African countries are the same background. This is something that I used to, when I work in Israel, I used to show this map. It's of UNESCO. And here we see the Arab countries, like the Arab states. Okay, some of them are monarchies. There are different way how to call it, but states. And this is where Israel is. It's under Europe and North America. So this is geopolitical map, or how the, and there is a Goethe Institute change. Israel was part of the Balkan, then the return Israel to the Middle East. This is geopolitics, the way I understand it, the one that's making policies. It can be, in our field, related to culture of policy, how you work, what are the resources. Thinking about coming to here, I thought about text of Hannah Arendt. She wrote it in 1948, published at the 50s, that's called Federation or Balkanization. She wrote it in the relation of the establishment of Israel. She wrote it just after. But in this text, she basically described the situation today. The situation of the impossibility of creating small, or sometimes very small countries or states to live together. And she described, if there is not to be a federation, between, of course, her main subject is Israel and the Arab countries, it will create the Balkanization. Yes, and she's talking about it at the 50s. I also start with her because she was, as probably you know, a good friend of Walter Benjamin and Gershon Scholem. And the catastrophe, or the way that I link to it, it's through Scholem first and then Benjamin. Scholem opened a new discipline. Before Scholem, the reading Messianism, Jewish Messianism was not exist. Today there are departments, there are scholars. In Germany, or especially from where he came, Kabbalah were discussed, part of the Jewish theology, but not Messianism. Scholem wrote a lot about Sabbatai Tzvi. Sabbatai Tzvi was a Jewish false messiah, born in the late 17th century in Izmir. Influence, one will say, and I think Scholem insists, that he brought modernization to the Middle East. This is through his connection with the Jewish community in Amsterdam and other places. There are two trends reading Jewish Messianism, and one of them that Scholem was focused, it's about that link to the catastrophe or the apocalyptic. It's also very important when he wrote and dealt with it, it's also with the discussion, with the correspondences with Benjamin, and it was around the catastrophe that happened at this time. So that the text, both texts reacting or looking at the catastrophe at this time, but also try to read it through Jewish Kabbalah and Messianism. Kabbalah can be white Kabbalah or black Kabbalah, but the end of history, the end of time coming from the thread that's going to the catastrophe, the end of everything, and then it's not written what will happen. It's quite different than the evangelist or Christian, especially evangelist Messianism that I will step back from Scholem, and I will talk about today. If we look at American Republicans, many of them are related to the evangelist church. They are investing quite a lot of money in the Middle East, especially in Jerusalem, to escalate the conflict between Israel and Palestine, Israel and other Arab countries. The aim is to create the moment of collapse, Gog and Magog, Armageddon, it's another story, but related to it, that then Jesus will come at the second time. But before he will come, and this is very much related to the Jewish Messianism, to the Jewish catastrophe, everything needs to be destroyed. According to one thread, it's related to the Third Temple. You can read, to open now, the newspaper, read what happened in the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. There is a daily conflict between Palestinian, Jewish, Jordan in relation to Israel. It's really became almost a messianic plot that we are following, because it's really going along. The evangelist said, like according to the evangelist, there are a few steps. First, Jewish people need to rule the Holy Land, 48. They need to rule Jerusalem, 67. And then they need to build the third temple that will be contaminated by the Jewish rabbi or whatever they run the temple. And then Jesus will come to create the new kingdom with, I don't know, thousands of something. Sorry, I don't remember. And we can follow how politics today going through these apocalyptic stories. Okay, I will return to Sholem. This is quite important. Many scholars, including Hannah Arendt and many others, compare Zionism or the Zionist idea with a messianic idea. Dealing with messianism and with politics, Sholem always refused to connect the two. And the reason that he refused to connect the two, because if he connect them, it means that the Zionist project is going to collapse. It's going to end in the catastrophe. It's going to disappear. So he couldn't connect, writing on both, involving in both. He couldn't connect them because if he will connect them, the state of Israel will going to be demolished. Just from the news, we can see a different movement in the Middle East. The latest one that it's the ISIS. If we think how ISIS operate, they are calling to basically to destruction. So they it's missionary force. The one we will not convert. Basically, they don't want to convert. Yes, there are or Muslim that think in a certain way, which we can. It's very confusing because we translate it through a certain kind of modern scholar idea, secular idea about religion, that they are not doing it. Yes, so this is the moment of paradigm change that we can't read the reality. ISIS and at the same time I can talk about like a Zionist movement, Messianic movement that calling for escalation, one call, and this can be related, this kind of split that Gershon Sholem doing and others are two. The one that's trying to force the Messiah will come just after the catastrophe. The Messiah, Judaism or anyone, it's coming after the catastrophe. So the one, and this is the two movement, the one that waiting for the Messiah and one that trying to force the Messiah to come. They are the two forces. So the evangelist trying to force, I will say, certain group trying to prevent from the moment of the collapse of the catastrophe. Catastrophe, it's used in, you talk about Schmidt and the geotheology, I will say, or political theology, yes? How, and he described, and also Abarbanel, which is a Jewish scholar, and Hobbes, how catastrophe is a tool for, to rule society. And we can see from a different event, today we can say that natural, yesterday we had discussion about global warming, for example, yes, global warming and other natural catastrophe. They are not anymore natural catastrophe. It's created by a human order. So we can't talk about like supreme power. What I try to connect in the terms of catastrophe, it's the replacement of God and the state. The state taking the place of God by creating the catastrophe. God punished us when we are bad in general, or we do something not along his line, yes? And not always we know exactly what we did wrong. This is one of the relation with God. It's happened also with the state. We can look, okay, I will say something else. Also, God also help us. No, this is like when there is a catastrophe or whatever, something bad, God, you are, going to help us or, solve the situation. We can look at the case of Germany and the asylum seekers, refugees. It's the same pattern. We could see it quite clearly during Iran, the revolution in Iran. Yes, they sent the weapons, and then they brought the refugee or the people that had to run away during the revolution in Iran to Germany. It's the same case that the responsibility of Europe, people say, like, talking about the responsibility of the Emirates or Arab countries, yes, but there is another responsibility. The responsibility of the one that caused the catastrophe and also to help it. So how to solve it. Yes, this is the role of God. He creates, but also he can solve. And this is one of the things that, unfortunately, the text of Adi Ophir about the divine violence that I quote just a bit, try to talk. He described quite, and then I will end. I will end with this. First, he going through chronology of the Old Testament. He started with the Genesis. He ends with when the Jewish people left Egypt. Yes, from slave to liberation. But the liberation was the liberation to create the Jewish kingdom or the place. Yes, what we call Israel today. So he described the place from non-state to become a state. And from this moment, he started to create the relation between the modern state and God, and the replacement that create of a human order and how the government, and we can see it, for me it's very visible in the Middle East, how Erdogan, for example, so we talk about changing from, it's not changing from secular to religion, it's more from the outside to the mainstream. Yes, we see the religion as discussion of the mainstream. Why? It's not only because people become better believer or practicing more. There is something else in the mechanism itself. In the mechanism itself that help to involve religion in the case instead of the responsibility of the state. So the relation between a state, it's one replace the other. The superpower is the state that create the catastrophe, the Middle East, what's happening in the Middle East and other places. I will give another example maybe, which is very simple, that maybe you can identify with. What called today crowd control. Crowd control, it's how to deal with the demonstration. Yes, this is the whitewash name for police brutality in demonstration. It's crowd control. The way that it's made, it's very easy. It's not a secret. There is a demonstration. The police create a moment of escalation that they need to enter with full power. Then they can control and save and create the quiet moment. So it's really a strategy that's working. It's not only in Brazil. It's not only in Israel. It's almost everywhere. And this is the same system to create the moment of clash and then to solve it and then to govern or to create the order. So to create this order, to create the order. Thank you.